Have you ever been in an argument that suddenly made no sense, where you were accused of doing exactly what you knew they were doing? They call you selfish, manipulative, or dishonest, and for a split second you question your own reality. You feel your chest tighten, your mind spin, and your heart whisper, "This isn't right." It's not a misunderstanding, it's psychological warfare. You've just witnessed one of the most deceptive tactics in a narcissist's arsenal. Projection is how the narcissist survives. It's their way of offloading shame, guilt, and fear they cannot bear to face within themselves. Instead of confronting their flaws, they throw them at you. Like a broken mirror, they reflect their inner chaos outward, rewriting the story so that you become the villain and they become the misunderstood victim. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But the narcissist stops right before that understanding. They can't face the reflection. It's too dark, too fragile, too revealing, so they destroy the mirror, then use you as a new one. They accuse you of lying so they can keep pretending to be honest. They call you controlling so they can keep feeling free. They paint you as cruel so they can still see themselves as good. Every accusation is, in truth, a confession in disguise. To the empath, this reversal feels like madness. You start defending yourself, explaining, trying to be understood, not realizing that the more you explain, the deeper you sink into their reality. Because the narcissist doesn't want truth, they want control. They provoke you until you react, and then calmly point and say, "See, you're the problem." They create chaos, then crown themselves the victim. But when you stop reacting, something remarkable happens. Their power collapses. The film they're projecting needs an audience, and when you walk out of the theater, the illusion dies. That's the turning point. The moment you see projection for what it is, they're in a war, not yours. You begin to take your power back. You stop being a character in their story and start becoming the author of your own. Projection isn't about you, it's about their fear of themselves. And the day you realize that, you stop trying to prove your innocence and start protecting your peace, because the truth is simple. You were never the villain. You were the mirror that told the truth. To understand why narcissists use projection, we have to enter the architecture of their mind, a place built on illusion and guarded by fear. A narcissist's identity is like a house made of glass, flawless on the outside, but hollow and trembling within. Deep beneath their polished exterior lies a basement filled with shame, envy, and self-hatred. And that's the part of themselves they cannot afford to see. Carl Jung described this as the shadow, the repressed part of the psyche that contains everything the ego refuses to acknowledge. For most people, facing the shadow is uncomfortable but healing. It's how we grow. For the narcissist, however, the shadow is unbearable. Admitting fault, weakness, or insecurity threatens their entire illusion of superiority. So rather than integrate the darkness, they export it onto you. Projection, then, is not just manipulation, it is psychic survival. Imagine their inner world as a boiling pot of shame that's about to overflow. The only way to keep the lid on is to make someone else hold it. So they offload their internal poison, their lies, jealousy, rage, into you. You become the emotional landfill for everything they can't process. And ironically, the closer you are to them, the more of their shadow they assign to you. This is why narcissists are drawn to empaths. Your sensitivity, your desire to understand, your willingness to take responsibility, these qualities make you the perfect canvas for their projections. They can pour their darkness into you, confident that you'll question yourself before you ever question them. In their mind, they're not lying, you are. They're not cruel, you're too sensitive. They're not controlling, you're unstable. They must rewrite reality because facing the truth would collapse their false self. But projection doesn't just protect their ego, it sustains their illusion. Every time they convince themselves that you're the problem, they reinforce their identity as the good one. This is the twisted balance their psyche depends on. If you are bad, they can remain good. If you are wrong, they can remain righteous. It's a fragile equilibrium built entirely on distortion. Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." The narcissist refuses that journey. Their light is fake, a spotlight shining on others to hide their own void. And every projection they throw is a desperate attempt to keep that void unseen. In truth, projection is the mirror they use to escape self-cognition. It's their defense against annihilation, psychological self-destruction. But here's the paradox. The very thing they use to survive is what keeps them from ever healing. Because by making you their enemy, they never have to meet themselves. If projection is the weapon, then fear is the hand that wields it. Every narcissistic projection is born from one of three primal needs: to escape accountability, to maintain control, and to preserve a fragile sense of self. These aren't random acts of cruelty, they are strategies of psychological survival. 1. To escape accountability. For a narcissist, admitting fault feels like annihilation. Responsibility threatens the illusion of perfection they've spent a lifetime constructing, so when something goes wrong, their instinct isn't to reflect, it's to redirect. If they lie, you're the liar. If they betray, you're unfaithful. If they fail, you're unsupportive. Blaming you allows them to keep their self-image intact. In their world, guilt is a deadly poison, and projection is the antidote. The tragedy is that this defense mechanism blinds them to growth. Where ordinary people might feel remorse and evolve, the narcissist stays stuck in eternal denial. The more they project, the further they drift from reality, until they live in a psychological mirror maze, endlessly running from their own reflection. 2. To maintain control. Projection isn't only about avoiding shame, it's about power. When you're busy defending yourself from accusations that make no sense, you're not calm, you're reactive. And in that reaction, the narcissist gains control. They provoke, distort, and manipulate until you break composure. Then, in your frustration, they find their victory. See? You're the unstable one. It's a carefully engineered trap. They weaponize confusion because confusion weakens. The more you try to clarify, the more they twist. The goal isn't resolution, it's domination. If you doubt your own truth, they own the narrative. Jung might say they turn you into their shadow puppet, forcing you to act out the parts of themselves they refuse to acknowledge. 3. To preserve the false self. At the core of every narcissist is a desperate split between who they are and who they pretend to be. This gap between the false self and the hidden, wounded self is the source of their constant projection. They need someone to play the bad role so they can continue being the good one. Without a villain, their hero mask falls apart. Projection is therefore their psychological glue, the substance that holds their fragile identity together. They must convince others of your flaws so they don't have to face their own. It's why they often say, "Everyone's against me," or "You've changed." What they really mean is, "My illusion is cracking, and I need you to carry my darkness again." But here lies the painful irony. The more they project, the more fragmented they become. Each accusation they throw outward splits them further inward. In trying to save their false self, they destroy the real one. And this is the great tragedy of narcissism. The refusal to meet one's own shadow ensures a lifetime of spiritual exile. Recognizing projection while it's happening can feel almost impossible. Narcissistic projection is subtle, seductive, and psychologically disorienting. It twists truth until you start doubting your own reflection. But once you learn to spot it, you stop absorbing their poison and start observing the pattern. Here are 5 unmistakable signs that you've become the mirror they're trying to break. 1. Sudden, illogical accusations. Accusations, it always starts with a shock. You're accused of lying, cheating, manipulating, completely out of nowhere. The accusation feels misplaced, because it is. They are revealing exactly what they're doing or planning to do. For instance, a narcissist who's secretly talking to someone else might suddenly accuse you of being unfaithful. Their guilt becomes your burden. They cannot bear their own intention, so they throw it at you first. A preemptive strike of shame. 2. They call you the narcissist. This is psychological inversion, one of the cruelest forms of projection. Once the narcissist learns the language of therapy, they weaponize it. They accuse you of being toxic, manipulative, or gaslighting them, all while doing those very things. The goal is to make you doubt your own reality, to silence your awareness, and to steal the narrative. When they call you the narcissist, what they really mean is, "You've started to see me." 3. Their favorite insults are hidden confessions. Pay attention to their repeated criticisms. A lazy person constantly accusing you of not doing enough. A jealous partner calling you attention-seeking. A dishonest person saying you can't be trusted. These are not random words. They are mirrors. Every insult is a subconscious confession. They're describing themselves but projecting it onto you because it's too painful to acknowledge internally. 4. They blame you for their emotions. One of the narcissist's deepest weaknesses is emotional dysregulation. Their anger, shame, and emptiness feel unbearable, so they outsource their emotions. Instead of saying, "I'm angry," they say, "You made me angry." Every emotional outburst becomes your fault. This keeps them from taking responsibility and traps you in a cycle of guilt and self-blame. In truth, no one makes anyone else feel something. We choose how we respond. But to a narcissist, that truth is intolerable because it means they're not in control. 5. They twist your boundaries into attacks. The moment you say no, they claim you're punishing them. When you ask for space, they accuse you of being cold or abandoning them. Your self-respect threatens their dominance, so they twist your protection into aggression. In their eyes, your boundary isn't a defense, it's a declaration of war. But remember, healthy people respect boundaries. Only the manipulative fear them. When you begin to see these signs, something changes inside you. The confusion starts to lift. You realize that their words aren't about truth, they're about transfer. They're trying to hand you their pain like a burning coal. But you don't have to hold it anymore. Once you recognize projection, the spell breaks. You step out of the story they wrote for you, and for the first time you see them not as the all-powerful manipulator, but as a frightened child trying to hide from their own shadow. What projection does to the empath is not just confusion, it's corrosion. Slowly it eats away at your sense of self. You start doubting your memory, your emotions, even your morality. You begin to live in their version of reality, where truth bends around their comfort and your voice becomes an inconvenience. This is not a relationship anymore, it's a psychological occupation. At first, you defend yourself. You explain, you clarify, you over-communicate. You think if you can just make them understand, the madness will stop. But that's the trap. Understanding was never the goal. Their goal was to make you question your perception, to blur the line between your guilt and their shame until you carry both. You become a prisoner of self-doubt, living inside the narrative they've built, one where you are always the problem and they are always the misunderstood victim. Carl Jung warned that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. In projection, you are being pulled into someone else's unconscious, their shadow, and if you stay there long enough, their unhealed wounds begin to shape your reality. You start apologizing for things you didn't do, lowering your tone to avoid conflict, editing yourself to preserve peace. Slowly, your nervous system learns that safety means silence. The empath's tragedy is that your heart tries to heal what was never yours to fix. You absorb their pain, their fear, their shame. Because that's what empaths do. They feel deeply. But emotional absorption becomes emotional possession when boundaries disappear. Their darkness becomes your burden. Their chaos becomes your climate. And without noticing, you begin to vanish, not physically, but spiritually. You wake up one day realizing you no longer recognize yourself because your reflection has been rewritten by someone else's projection. This is what chronic projection does. It severs you from your center. It disconnects you from intuition, from clarity, from peace. You start asking, maybe I am the problem, when, in truth, you've just been living under psychological hypnosis. That's the hidden cruelty of projection. It doesn't just distort how they see you, it slowly distorts how you see you. But here's the awakening. The confusion itself is the proof of manipulation. Truth is steady, lies are dizzying. The moment you feel the spin, it means you've entered their illusion. And the moment you recognize that, you begin to reclaim your reality. You step back from their storm. And for the first time, you can hear the silence of your own mind again. A silence that isn't empty, but sacred. Healing from projection means unlearning the reflex to take responsibility for other people's emotions. It means reminding yourself, their feelings are not my fault. Their chaos is not my home. The empath doesn't heal by absorbing more. The empath heals by returning what was never theirs to carry. Escaping projection isn't about fighting harder. It's about seeing clearer. You don't win this battle by arguing louder. You win it by refusing to play their game. The moment you recognize projection for what it is, their spell begins to break. Awareness is your shield. Silence is your sword. 1. Name it. See it for what it is. The first step is simple but powerful. Call it by its name. The instant you feel that dizzying sense of confusion, pause and remind yourself, this isn't about me, this is projection. Saying it out loud anchors you in truth. It separates your identity from their illusion. When you name it, you stop absorbing it. You move from being a participant to being an observer. And in that shift, their control begins to dissolve. 2. Defend, disengage. The narcissist's survival depends on your reaction. The more you defend, the deeper they pull you into their false reality. You cannot win an argument with someone whose goal is not clarity but control. Instead, respond with neutrality. I see things differently, or I'm not going to discuss this. Short, calm, emotionless replies. That's the grey rock method. They want chaos, give them stillness. They want fire, give them stone. 3. Stay grounded in your reality. Projection thrives in isolation. It works best when you're cut off from external perspectives. So build anchors to reality. Keep a journal of what actually happens. Talk to a friend, therapist, or support group who understands manipulation. Hearing your story reflected back with clarity reminds you that you're not crazy, you're being gaslit. This practice rebuilds trust in your perception, which is exactly what projection tries to destroy. 4. Reclaim emotional boundaries. The narcissist's secret weapon is your empathy. They depend on your sensitivity to feel powerful, but empathy without boundaries becomes self-betrayal. Learn to distinguish between compassion and responsibility. You can care without carrying. When their emotions rise, repeat to yourself, this feeling belongs to them, not me. It may sound small, but that affirmation rewires the nervous system. It reminds your body that you are safe inside yourself. 5. Choose silence over explanation. When projection escalates, the narcissist will provoke you to explain, justify, prove. Don't. Every explanation feeds their illusion. Remember, silence doesn't mean surrender, it means sovereignty. In silence, you stop supplying energy to the drama. You choose peace over performance. And nothing threatens a narcissist more than your calm detachment, because it shows you've left the stage entirely. Breaking free is not revenge, it's liberation. You don't need to expose them, the truth always exposes itself. Your only job is to guard your peace, to stay grounded in what's real. Over time, as you hold your truth without defending it, their projections fall flat. The movie stops because the screen refuses to show it. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you own your shadow, it will own you." But the inverse is also true. When you refuse to carry someone else's shadow, you reclaim your light. The empath's power is not in fighting darkness, but in choosing not to house it. Freedom begins the moment you realize you don't have to be the mirror anymore. There comes a moment after the chaos, a stillness that feels almost holy. It's the moment when you stop fighting to be understood and start understanding yourself. That's the awakening, when the mirror that once trapped you becomes the mirror that frees you. The narcissists wanted you to believe their story, to live inside their projection, but projection only works as long as you reflect it. Once you choose truth over illusion, the entire structure collapses. Their control fades not because you punish them, but because you outgrew their reality. You learned the art of not reacting, and that is the purest form of freedom. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the integration of shadow and light, the birth of the sovereign self. Through the fire of deception you have learned to see clearly. Through the pain of confusion you have discovered your boundaries. You have walked through their darkness and found your center, the part of you that cannot be manipulated, shamed, or erased. When you finally stop being the narcissist's mirror, you become the mirror of truth itself. Not the mirror that reflects their illusion, but the one that reflects clarity, steady, silent, sovereign. You no longer absorb what isn't yours. You no longer chase closure from chaos. You simply stand in your own light, and in doing so, expose the falseness around you without saying a word. The beauty of this stage is quiet. There's no revenge, no spectacle, no validation needed. The victory is internal. You reclaim your peace, your voice, your sense of reality. You look at yourself, not through their eyes, but through the eyes of truth. And you realize you were never broken. You were being refined. The narcissist's projection was never about who you were. It was about what they refused to see in themselves. And your awakening is the divine reversal of that process. You no longer carry their darkness, you transform it. You don't mirror their pain, you illuminate it. And now, as you walk forward, you understand something profound. Your peace is your power, your silence is your statement, and your clarity is your protection. You have become what the narcissist feared most. Someone who sees through illusion and refuses to play in it. You no longer need to prove, to fix, or to convince. You simply live aligned with truth. Because when the empath awakens, the narcissist's story ends, and a new one begins. A story written not in manipulation, but in mastery, not in projection, but in presence. And this time you hold the pen.